Hello everyone, my name is Alex. I'm a 2000 rated over-the-board chess player, and in this series we're going from 1000 to 2000 elo in chess.com rapid games, and during the games I'll be explaining my thought process as best as I possibly can for your education and entertainment. We have a Vienna game, and my opponent has played the move f5. I have no idea what this is. I assume I should be taking. This seems like my opponent had prepared knight f3, f5, which is actually an opening. That might be the Latvian Gambit, I want to say. Knight c3, f5, that doesn't really work, because I'm pretty sure we just take. And I believe the whole point of the Latvian Gambit with the knight on f3 is that you can play e4 to attack the knight. But my knight is on c3, so that doesn't work. And I'm pretty sure this is just a bad position for black. I wouldn't be surprised if we could just play the move g4 and just hang on to our extra pawn. I think bishop c4 would be a bad move here because of the move d5, and that just kicks my bishop back. There's no queen h5 ideas because, of course, the knight is stopping that. We could play a move like d3 and play it like king's... Like, when I have the black pieces against the king's Indian defense, I like to play the move d6, known as the Morphy defense, and play like, I don't know, bishop g5, g4 ideas, but obviously in reverse. But here, because we're a tempo up, we already have a knight on the c3 square. This should just be way, way better. d3, moves like bishop c5, we just go like bishop g5, I assume. And like castles, I don't think we really have any problems. Knight e4 there just forces trades, which is probably why the knight on c3 is quite powerful. So I'm going to play the move d3. I have no idea if this is the correct move, but this is a big part of chess. This really is, because my opponent's played an opening that I have never seen before. Like, I don't know if I've ever played against this. Maybe once I've seen this online. And I feel like he's trying to play a Latvian Gambit with a knight on f3 and the pawn on f5, except this isn't, I don't think this is a real Gambit. And so, I've never seen this. Yeah, my opponent goes bishop c5 as expected, but I don't think this works. And I'm trying to play this in the style of how I would play against the king's gambit with the black pieces, except I'm a tempo up, which means it should be really, really good. Bishop g5, I think, is a good move. Now, what you do have to be aware of is like bishop f2, king f2, and knight check ideas for the queen to win my bishop back. But they don't work. And my opponent castles, and this is exactly what I calculated. And I think knight e4 just immediately liquidates pieces. Now, we don't have to play knight e4. We don't have to, but I feel like it's a very good idea. Because if bishop to e7... Do we want to take or not? If take, bishop takes, queen takes, g4, that feels a bit meh. I feel like... No, we don't have to do anything yet. We can just leave it for now. My opponent could play d5 and stop the move knight e4, but because of the pressure here, we will have good pressure on the d5 pawn. I think it might make more sense to play a move like queen e2 and get castled queenside. And we can maybe even start some kind of pawn storm on the king side, using our f5 pawn as already being in the position. And if my opponent plays a move like h6, and we maybe retreat, then moves like g4, g5 could be quite powerful. So while this is definitely an idea, I'm not sure it's necessary. We could play knight d5, though, going after the knight. And if my opponent does nothing, then like knight takes, pawn takes, bishop h6, and black loses a whole lot of his firepower because the f-file gets shut immediately. If knight d5, bishop e7, we could just take the bishop, and after queen takes, then we keep our bishop on g5, so we continue the pressure. But I also feel like there's no rush with any of that, so I think I like the move queen e2, which may look a little bit odd because I'm blocking in my light squared bishop. But my plan is to go g4, bishop g2. And then this knight, I'm not quite sure what I'm going to do with it yet. I might put it on the f3 square. But I want to ensure that I have really good control over e4 before I bring my knight to f3, so that there's no ideas of my opponent breaking through my position with e4. d6 feels a bit passive. I feel like even though d5 is maybe a little bit weak, and yes, I'm attacking the e-pawn, but rook e8 would win my queen, I feel like d6 is a bit passive. g4 is probably forced to defend the pawn, so I'm going to play it. This bishop can come out to h3 in some lines. That is definitely an idea sometimes in the Morphy defense from the black side against the King's Gambit, which, again, is what I'm kind of using as inspiration for this opening. But I think bishop g2 actually makes far more sense, because not only do we stop pawn e4 ideas, but we also clamp down on the d5 square. And of course, the g4 pawn supports my f5 pawn, my queen supports my g4 pawn, the knight isn't attacking this anyway because of the pin. A move like h6 can probably be met with bishop to h5, and we can prepare ideas of g5. We probably want to castle queenside, because black doesn't really have any pressure over there. Knight d4 is an idea now. Is that a problem? We could go knight to e4. We could go knight e4, because now the bishop can't drop back to e7, which was why I rejected it initially. If here, queen d2, we prepare the move c3 to kick the knight away. Our knight controls the f3 square. This knight can't come back into the game because our pawns are locking it out. I think I like this move. And I think it's important to move the knight, because after knight comes into d4, I need to move my queen and then play the move c3. So I need this knight to get out of the way, essentially. If I start with a move like knight to f3, then my opponent can't take on g4 because of the pin. But I don't like the weakness of this pawn. However, thinking about it, if knight here, queen d2, this pawn is hanging. Again, the knight is pinned, but I can meet a move like h6 with knight takes, pawn takes, and I win the pawn. So I think for all of those reasons, I should play this. I should play knight e4. And I feel like these sacrifices should never work. They should never work, because bishop takes. Not only do I have the d1 square, there's no like legal trap mating ideas. If you've never heard of the legal trap, search it up. It's really interesting. But that's never a concern. And even if I don't want to walk into that, I could just take with the queen. And I probably end up like a piece up there for a pawn, but we're already up a pawn, so we'll just end up a piece up in most of those lines, I would assume. If you are enjoying the video so far, and you haven't yet already, please drop a like and subscribe. I would really appreciate it. Really helps to keep motivating me to make more videos. Don't make the mistake of knight takes f6 check. You might think, oh, we're taking with check, we get rid of the knight. Awesome, then this pawn isn't a problem. That would be a very bad move, because knight takes pawn takes, and now we're hanging two different pieces. Then you're a piece down. So no, queen d2 I think is the move. Bishop b4 is never a concern. We're going to play c3, of course. We want to play that anyway. That would just be helping us. And knight to f3 check would be a massive problem. Forking three different pieces in our position, but our knight on f3 controls... Sorry, our knight on g1 controls the f3 square. So that's not a concern. I want to play the move c3 and boot this knight out of the position, and then we can continue with plans of bishop g2, maybe knight f3, maybe knight d2, maybe h3 to support this pawn, because our queen is no longer supporting the pawn. There's a lot of things we can do here, but I think one of the major issues for black is simply take bishop h6, forcing the rook to move, and my opponent's king is weak. The f-file is shut down, meaning that my f5 pawn is very difficult to win. And black's king is actually really weak there. Moves like h4, g5 could be a big problem in the long run. Maybe not immediately, but in the long run, they could be concerning. So I'm really happy with this position. I don't think we could have got a much better position from the opening, if I do say so myself. Sorry about that. I hope there hasn't been any background noise in this video. I suppose I'll check that after I finish recording, but I don't think there is. Okay, this is pretty damn perfect. And side note, the bishop is also under attack. Now, I don't think I ever really want to take the bishop, because I feel like that just helps black. Like, this is a strong bishop, yeah. But I think black would probably want to open up the d-file, because then c3 is harder to play, because the d3 pawn would be weaker, because the d-file would be open to target it, and it would become very difficult to play pawn d4 if there's pawns on c5 and e5 clamping down on the d4 square. So that's not really something I'm thinking about. My opponent's taking some time to think here. Yeah, he does go for this. Not gonna lie, I kind of forgot that this comes with an attack on my queen. So if I take here and my opponent takes there, then I'm probably losing. So I think I probably have to take this knight, but my queen is defending my bishop. So this should be fine. I also have bishop c4 check now, which would develop with tempo. Admittedly, I didn't spot this, but I don't think it is a concern whatsoever. Maybe knight c2? Maybe knight c2 is the idea. Ooh. Forcing my queen away from my bishop. That would be very smart. He might play it as well. However, I think it loses because of king d1. That is really nice. King d1 wins there. Because, yes, my rook is under attack. But your queen is still under attack. Yeah, so he moves the queen. Now I think we can go ahead with the move c3 and kick the knight away. We could also throw in bishop c4 check, but I don't think the move order matters. Of course, knight c2 now does nothing because nobody is attacking the bishop. So the knight has to retreat, and then I think bishop c4 is a good move because we clamp down on the d5 square. My opponent also can't block the check with bishop to e6 because we control that square with the f5 pawn. And now with pawns on e4 and g4 and f5, it's going to be really difficult for my opponent to win this pawn, if not impossible. I mean, if I want to, I could create some really cool little light squared pattern here with my pawns, but it's not necessary. Let's give a check. I want to have a few pawns left on dark squares, at least for the time being, because this is a strong bishop at the end of the day. Let's give a check. There's only one move. The king has to move over to h8. And then we can see what we want to do. We could even bring the bishop back to e3 to offer a bishop trade, which, not gonna lie, looks really appealing, because this is obviously black's best piece by a country mile. And now that the knight and the queen have moved, this bishop isn't really doing anything. Now, we could start with just normal developing moves, sure, but I think this is actually probably the best move. And I'm going to play it as well to try and keep some time pressure on my opponent, because we are currently down on time, so if I can win a bit of time back by playing a quick move here, then that is good. And now my opponent has to think, because bishop b6 looks like the most natural move, because if I take, my opponent can take with the a pawn, open up his rook, and if I castle queenside, maybe that's a concern. My bishop, of course, defends the a2 square, even if I do castle queenside and my rook no longer defends it. But yeah, taking I don't think is good. Taking with a pawn is playable, but it's unnecessary. Let's take with a queen. This square is very well defended. I probably want to castle queenside, and then I'll decide what I want to do with the knight. The knight could go to g3 to just support my light squares, or it could go to f3 to try and get in on the dark squares and maybe make it to a square like e6 or f7. I think h4, h5, h6 is also an idea in these scenarios. F3, now that the dark squared bishop is off the board, is a lot more playable, just to lock my pawns in place. a6 doesn't do anything. I didn't want to play bishop b5 anyway, so let's queenside castle. My opponent may be trying to play the move b5, but I'm not really concerned about that, because I think just bishop d5 and this knight is in a bit of trouble. The queen is defending the knight is pinned to the rook. That looks very uncomfortable. Yeah, okay. Well, the knight can go to a5, but bishop e2 or bishop d3, which stops... Well, the queen could come to a4, I suppose. Queen d3 does defend my bishop, but that feels inaccurate. It's an interesting move, actually. We could consider bishop to b3 and allow this trade and prepare king c2. Now, maybe a5, a4 is annoying there. We could shift our rook to the a file, though, if the king ends up on c2. Which does look appealing. It does look appealing. Because we are up a pawn at the end of the day. And while this bishop is very strong, we do have a lot of pawns on light squares. It's an interesting move from my opponent. Okay, what happens if we go bishop d3? Well, queen a4 is the arguably most obvious move. King b1, defending a2. The knight has nowhere to go. If the knight comes to c4, then we probably take it. Or even queen e2, just attacking the knight. b5. Then we have b3, but then there's knight a3 check. Although I think we're winning the knight in that variation, because after king b2, the queen would have to retreat. We could play bishop to b3, and after takes king c2, we're probably okay, but my opponent could instead play the move queen b5, which is a bit more annoying. So I think stopping the queen from coming to b5 might be a bit more important. So I'm going to play bishop d3. Now, if queen a4, you might be tempted to go bishop to b1, but I don't want my bishop tied down to the defense of the a-pawn. I'd much rather my king do that task, which you may think is scary. But this bishop can't come to e6 to help out, so I don't have to worry about that. And because of the geometry with the knight and the a2 square, it's going to be very difficult for this knight to help out. It would have to go like c6, b4 to attack a2, but of course it doesn't have access to the b4 square because we defend it. I just realised king b1 hangs the rook. I missed that. That's actually quite annoying. I think bishop b1 has to be played then. If I'd realised that, I wouldn't have played bishop d3. a3 looks idiotic. b3, of course, is idiotic. Oh, I don't love that at all, but I think I have to play it. That's gross. Now knight c4 is actually quite annoying. I don't have a choice, do I? I don't have a choice. Okay. This is an annoying move. He doesn't go for it. Interesting. Now, the queen is almost trapped after this, but it does have the a3 square. I don't think there's a way for us to take away that square. Is b4 a problem? Queen d2? b4? I don't really want to open the b file. Maybe knight e2, defending c3 makes sense. This is a bit uncomfortable now. I messed up a bit there. What should I have done? I mean, we'll find out after the game. To be honest, I probably should have just started with developing my knight. And after I move like b5, bishop b3, and if knight a5, I could have just gone bishop b3 and allowed this trade and just not castled queenside. Maybe that was a bit preemptive. Okay, well, that's annoying, but the game goes on, of course. And we're probably still winning, but we need to find a way around this, because knight c4 is... Maybe knight f3 is better to go knight d2 and control these squares, rather than c3. I think that makes more sense. Knight f3, b4, knight d2. If take, I think we're okay. I think we're okay, because we have so many pieces defending my king. Yeah, I'm going to play it. Ugh, this is very annoying, but I don't want to play the move a3 and allow the knight into b3, because that feels suicidal. That feels suicidal. Knight c4, that is not something I expected. I thought b4 would be played immediately. But now we can get queen d3, no? I think we can just go queen d3, and then we're okay. Because, of course, our queen was under attack. b2 is under attack, but that doesn't do anything. And now b4 is not playable because we just win the knight. So now knight d2 is a very strong move. Also, b3, as I mentioned before, does exist, but after queen a3, king c2, queen b2, we are mated. So we'd have to instead run to d2, but I don't really want to allow the queen in like that. That feels risky. You could claim you're trying to trap the queen, I suppose. But, like, I feel like there's easier ways of going about this position. Also, bear in mind, queen d5 does attack the rook in some lines, so that should be noted. But I don't think it does anything just yet. And, okay, what are my next moves? Well, knight d2 is, of course, on the cards to offer a knight trade, which is going to be difficult for black to decline. Queen c2 offers a queen trade, which is a bit easier for black to decline. So that doesn't really do anything. I think knight d2 makes a lot of sense. A lot of sense. Because it's also difficult for black to support this knight, because of course you don't have bishop e6, which is a really good thing. A really good thing. Okay. a5 prepares b4, but you still can't play b4 because the knight hangs. Maybe knight d2 doesn't make sense. But actually, queen c2 can be played here. Because my opponent just blocked off his queen's escape square. So that would force a queen trade, right? And then we're just winning. Yeah, queen c2. The knight has nowhere useful to go. He could try knight b2, and if queen takes, then knight takes, he wins a pawn. But I, of course, just won't take the queen. I'll just take the knight. Bishop takes here makes a lot of sense. Now b4 isn't that strong. I could even take and allow the opening of the a file and play bishop c2, but I think stronger is just bishop to b3. That makes more sense. Bishop b3, of course, just attacking the knight. My opponent can't take because I will take the knight. And there's no way for the knight to come to like e3 with an attack on the rook, so the knight has to retreat. Here we could push c4, but then a4 is annoying. It means that our bishop won't be able to defend the c4 square. We could take as well, and after takes, the a2 square is well defended. I think knight g5 might be a bit more accurate, because knight to f7 is a threat, because if the king moves, we'll like take with discovered check or something. However, if knight g5 h6, knight f7, king h7, I'm not sure what the knight's doing, and the knight is actually just quite vulnerable. So that seems a bit silly. I think taking is the best move. If a4, then we just move the bishop with tempo, and we're up 2 pawns, and a3 locks the queenside shut. If my opponent takes, he can't challenge this bishop, and the bishop defends a1. I think king b1 makes the most sense anyway, because my rook wants to go to c1, because this is a weak pawn, and if I can induce the move c5, then d6 will become undefendable, probably. And also, I just don't want my bishop tied down to the defense of a2. I'd rather my king be able to do it. Okay, my opponent wants to go to c5, which is a very good idea. Very good idea. Now maybe knight g5 makes more sense. Because if my opponent goes knight c5, then knight f7 is an issue. Then, although my bishop is under attack... Let me think. Well, if knight g5, knight c5, knight f7 check, if rook takes, of course, we just take back. That's winning. So knight g5, knight c5, knight f7 check, king g8. Then maybe knight d6 check. Of course, with king h8, then we're winning. So my opponent would have to take on b3. But then we can take on c8. And if my opponent takes my knight, I take his knight, and we're up 2 pawns with an open d file that we're already on. And if my opponent retreats the knight, like back to c5, then we can always come back to e7 with check if we want. So I think this works. Let's go knight g5. Also, actually, after knight c5, we can just go bishop d5, which is probably stronger, thinking about it. Yeah, this is winning, no? I mentioned this move so long ago. Like, I mentioned this move all the way back in this position. I said, this is an idea. And then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 moves later, this idea comes to fruition. In chess, often the threat is stronger than the execution, because the execution has to be carried out at the correct time. Sometimes it never needs to be carried out, and the threat of something can simply just stop your opponent from doing what they want to do. Here, if my opponent had realized bishop d5 is a problem, then the threat would have been stronger than the execution, because he wouldn't have been able to play knight c5. He maybe would have to play a move like bishop to b7 to prevent this, and in that way, the threat would be stronger than the execution. But here, the execution is stronger than the threat because my opponent didn't recognize the threat. And now, this is hanging, and knight f7 is happening, and my opponent can't defend both threats at once. Quite simply, he can't defend both threats at once. So a move like, I don't know, rook a7, knight f7 check. If rook takes, bishop takes, of course, we're up in exchange and a pawn, and b3 never really does anything. We can probably just take it or play the move a3. So rook a7, knight check, king g8. I think we just probably take on d6. And actually, if the king goes back, we can just come straight back to f7 with another check. And if he goes back to g8, then we can take on e5 with check. And we just windmill. Yeah, of course we give this check. I think my opponent will probably take with the rook, and then maybe try and take on e4. Which does make sense. I don't really want to give that e-pawn up, to be honest. f3 does look quite tempting. Admittedly. However, if f3, h6, knight f7, king h7, then I don't really know what we're doing. Because my knight's got nowhere to go. So I think we have to give this check. And I think my opponent will go for the line where he wins the e4 pawn. Which does also threaten f2. So we probably have to go rook h to f1 there to defend. So this is what I'm expecting. If my opponent goes king g8, he's completely lost. And he has absolutely no chance of bringing this game back, I don't think. So we'll see what he opts for. Yeah, he does go for it. That is a very principled approach. Now f2 is under attack. f3 would, of course, hang a fork. So I think rook f1 makes the most sense. And now we want to play the move f3 to kick his knight away. My bishop can come back to b3 at any point. That's probably where it belongs. Oh, I missed that move. Oh, I missed that. That's a good move. Ugh. I think we might have to go bishop d5. That's really annoying. That's a great find. I completely missed that. Let's think. Maybe we have to go rook g1. Ugh, and allow this. Very frustrating. I should not have missed that. That's a very good move. I don't see anything better. Rook e1? But then g4 is going to hang, so let's go rook g1. That was very silly. I should not have allowed that. Now black is back in the game. Knight f2. Yeah, he goes for it. Of course, attacking my other rook. I think we have to go rook c1, probably. Because I would love to play rook f1, but I can't. So let's go rook c1, applying pressure. He may move the pawn with an attack on my bishop, which, of course, I will hopefully now not blunder. And I think there we probably go bishop c4, offering a bishop trade. I think that benefits us. I mean, c5 we could go bishop d5. There is also the move knight d3 here, attacking my rook, which is also supported by the bishop. And then maybe you want to go to the like f4 square. But where does the rook go? Maybe c6? Bishop b5 is annoying though. Yeah, I don't love that. This actually looks like quite a good move. My rook doesn't have all that many squares. And if rook c2, knight f4, then this is a threat. Although if knight d3, rook c2, knight f4, I think we probably go bishop to c4. And if bishop b7, threatening bishop to e4, that's actually quite an annoying move again. What I want to do is just go g5, f6. And if something like takes, this is a threat. And I'm trying to force one of my pawns through as quickly as possible before my opponent can create too much counterplay. Not easy, though. Straight away? Well, b3 is just a free pawn. That doesn't work. Because my bishop still monitors that diagonal. I think this is a bit of an inaccuracy from my opponent, because he also takes away the d3 square from the knight. Yeah, okay, you can play e4, but the problem is, the pawn can make it all the way to e2, but e1 is well defended. It makes sense, but I don't think it works. I think g5, if knight h3, we have rook g3. That's not a problem. Again, if the c-pawn moves, our bishop is under attack. We can always just retreat it to some square. It's an interesting idea. I just don't believe that it works. We could start with rook g3. I don't think that makes sense. I think g5 is the most principled move. e3, I think we ignore it. Because it looks really scary, but I'm pretty sure our position is okay. Very nice counterplay that my opponent's creating. Really hats off to him. A move like g6, I don't actually think taking would make sense. I think pushing would make more sense. And then just drop the bishop, push the pawn. Game is not over. My opponent's doing a good job. He's doing a very good job. And I just completely missed that bishop a6 idea. He does go for c5, now attacking my bishop. g6 I don't think is a good move, because I don't want this trade. The bishop could go to e6. Does that do anything? I don't know. I think d5 might make more sense. b3 is okay, but I think d5. Although, if bishop d5, knight to h3, rook g3, then there's knight f4 with an attack on my bishop. But if my bishop goes to d3 after this bishop moves... Oh wait, no, that's okay. The knight would struggle to attack this square. So maybe bishop here is okay. But then... Oh wait, no, d4 can't be played because I take it. I was worried about c5 ideas. If bishop here and c5 immediately, then we just take it. If rook c7, take... That should be winning. I do like this move, though. With knight to h3, we don't have to go rook g3. Even if this does happen... Maybe we just go back to b3 then and claim... But then there's knight e2 ideas. Ugh, it's very complicated. We could even go bishop c4 and offer a bishop trade. But I think my bishop's too strong. I don't want to trade my bishop. It's cutting this king off so that it will struggle to stop this pawn from getting through. I suppose in a way, moving the bishop is actually helpful because it gets out of the way of this pawn. Yeah, I don't think e3 does anything. He's not threatening. I mean, he's threatening my f-pawn, but we just move it. Yeah, let's go. Let's go. We've got to make this pawn get through. If take, this is also a mate threat. Now, I'd never really want to take, because after king takes or rook takes, there's no threats. The king can't come to g8, which is really useful as well. And I want to play the move f7, threatening to promote. And again, the king is cut off. Bishop g6 would stop the move f7, which might be the best idea for black. Difficult move to find, though. difficult move to find. If here, rook g3 attacking the pawn and maybe trying to play rook f3. Very complicated. If e2 there, then we... Wait, what would we have? Maybe rook e3 attacking the pawn. And if like bishop h5, yeah, he does go for it. I think rook g3 makes sense. I know that this comes with an attack on my rook though. But if I play rook g3 and I get to the e-file, I do have mating threats after f7. There are mating threats. Does rook e3 make more? Sorry, rook e1. And then this comes with a fork, and if we take f7, but then he can take here with check, and that's actually mate because the pawn is pinned and b1 isn't available. So if here, we have to move the rook. Oh, this is so complicated. I'm going to play rook g3 because I actually don't know what the correct move is. e2 would lose. e2 loses. That's what I want my opponent to play. I want my opponent to play e2. And then I think we win. We have rook f3 or rook e3, and I think both of them probably win. Again, I don't want to take. I want him to take me. I think rook f3 might make more sense, actually, with tempo on the knight. My only concern is like e2 here. Maybe then we have to take and go f7. And then if rook a8... Oof, I don't even know. That's complicated, because I don't have the f1 square. I actually don't know there. Take, okay. We could take this, actually. There's an option, but I think taking here is better. This does fork my rook and my pawn. I didn't consider that. I can play rook f3 to defend, but then moves like knight d2 are annoying. So if here, I might have to just give the pawn up and get rid of my opponent's very scary e-pawn. Because I know it's not necessarily a concern, but it's still, it's there. It's annoying. Can I do this? The problem is that taking on b3 is a threat of checkmate. That's the issue. Although I would have bishop to d5. Oh no, my rook is hanging. So I have to take. My rook would hang. Annoying. He does take. What do we do? What do we do? Let's start with rook d1. This is always in my back pocket. We're down a pawn, but we're up an exchange. And I think we can maybe win these pawns. Because they are weak. And our bishop's blockading them well. Our bishop's doing a great job of that. My opponent's pieces are putting pressure on my king, which, you know, isn't ideal. But I don't think it's too big of a problem. Okay, good move. Knight e4 expected. Knight e4, bishop c2. Then there's, I don't know, moves like knight f2. Not over. It's not over. Rook f1. Oh, he goes back. That's very passive. Now we have bishop a4, right? And then it's game over. Bishop a4, I think, wins the game. Because you can't try to counterattack my rook, because I'll just take, and if you take, I take, and the game is over. If you play rook d8, I'm pretty sure I just take if rook takes, I just trade more rooks. If bishop takes, then rook d6, and I have lots of threats. The rook would have to move to like c8, and the game should be over. Wow, my opponent put up a good fight. He put up a really good fight in a very strange opening. Actually, no, this makes more sense. Because if we trade, we trade. If my opponent moves the rook, then we just go rook d8 and force trades. So he goes for this, and we probably win the bishop in that line as well. And now it's just a rook versus a bishop. And the game should be done. The game should be done. Wow. Intense game. Very intense game. And the computer analysis will be really interesting because I have certainly gone wrong a few times in that game, but I think queenside castling was the wrong idea. I think I should have kept my king in the center for a bit longer, and then later down the line, once I'd developed the rest of my pieces and maybe started a kingside attack, then maybe developing, then maybe castling queenside would make more sense. But I think I just did it a bit too preemptively. Fortunately, we were able to stave off the attack and get to the victory. I mean, okay, the game technically isn't over yet, but I don't think my opponent can do a whole lot more. Okay. Okay, I'll play rook c6. Pawn c4 forced. Let's go rook c7. Putting pressure on both. Now either the king has to defend somehow or the bishop has to retreat. And then I'm probably going to go rook b7, attacking the b pawn. And then after b3, play a4. And then I will promote the pawn, is my idea. And c3 is not a problem because I just take it and then king b2. I'm trying to force my opponent to move his pawns forward in a way that is advantageous. That's a good move. Maybe. I mean, we still just attack the pawn, though. And you have to play this. I mean, if you go c3, I suppose there is actually a trap where if I take c2 and I can't stop the promotion, but here I just push a4. And I can bring my rook back to c7 to attack this pawn if I want. My king almost has no squares. After bishop f5, my king would have no squares, but it doesn't matter because I'm blockading on the dark squares. That's the important part. Also, his king is completely out the game. If the king was on, like, d3, maybe this is a different story. Maybe. But the king isn't on d3. The king is way, way back. Let's attack the... Oh, I don't know why I just allowed that. I'll have to go rook to a7. That was a bit silly. Yeah, I don't know why I just did that. I mean, we're still just going to push the pawn through. That's fine. My rook is now in a dark square. The king can come to c1 if I really want, but I don't think it makes a difference because this king is so far away, and also I'm cutting it off anyway. If the king saunters too far over as well, I could just take the h-pawn if I really want and get a second passed pawn. So now, of course, the plan is just to throw this pawn down the board, go something like rook c7, push, push, and if bishop takes, then I check and win the bishop. That's the plan. I don't think black can do anything about it. Again, he is being very resistant here, which is, you know, quite admirable. Quite admirable, but the h-pawn is also a problem, so I suspect he probably will move the h-pawn. Yep. And then he'll continue bringing his king. But the king never makes it in time. Let's go rook to c7. Attack the bishop, x-ray the c-pawn. I don't really care about the c-pawn. Bishop d5 makes the most sense. Defending and defending, but we're just going to push. King here, promote, bishop takes, rook c8 check. And I think that's the cleanest way to win the game. Very nice fight. Very nice fight. Rook a5, I think, is the best move here by a long shot because we lock the king out of the game and now the king can't help out. We can just leave our rook here and our king can go pick up these two pawns and then maybe even pick up the h-pawn if we really want, but like we don't want to allow the king in. It's still winning, but we don't want to allow anything. Let's just bring the king over to the c3 square. My opponent can come over here to try and attack my rook, but we'll just play rook h5 if king b6 and maintain our ability to lock the king out of the game because we just completely cover the 5th rank and there's no way to kick my rook out. You know, you could argue this is overkill, but I don't see any reason to throw any bones to my opponent. You know, let's not just give him anything. Yeah, it looks like I have made a couple of mistakes, which is inevitable, really, because I should have been more winning than I was. But yeah, very strange opening, and let's see where we could have done better and where we did do well. I think I handled the opening correctly, though, so let's take a look. Okay, so 83% accuracy. Not amazing, not amazing. Many mistakes made, which it was a very complicated game. So let's see what they were. Of course, e4, e5, knight c3. f5 is obviously a mistake, and taking is the best move. Knight f3 is playable, but like, it's a free pawn. My opponent's got no threats. Knight f6. Computer wanted the immediate g4, but I went for d3, just because this is similar to the Morphy defense against the King's Gambit, which is what I play against, well, what I used to play against the King's Gambit, because I now play the Caro Khan, but I used to play e5. And after here, I used to play the move d6 in this position, which I think is the second best move. But I used to really like these positions. I used to do quite well in them. Okay, apparently it's the Fischer defense. I thought this was the Morphy defense. Okay, whatever. My f5 here doesn't work. Oh, that's not what I meant to do. Bruv, please. ef5, knight f6. I will go for like a Morphy or Fischer defense. I don't know which one it is now. Idea. Bishop c5 is an inaccuracy, even though it looks like the most natural move. Bishop g5 is a mistake? Why? g4 castles. Computer wants to prioritize kingside development, I think. Bishop g2, if d5. Yeah, I just wants to secure the pawn chain first, and if g6, which is a typical idea, g5, normally the knight gets sacrificed like this in King's Gambit positions. I suppose I can take on d5, but, you know, this alignment is really scary. I didn't want to go for this because I felt like everything was winning anyway, and this is a bit more dangerous in my eyes, so I go for this. Bishop g5, castles. The computer does want the immediate knight d5. I rejected this on the basis of bishop to e7, but I suppose I can just take it. Because I was thinking knight e4, but this isn't quite as good. Because if I trade everything, then I'm actually not even much better, which is the conclusion I came to, because g4 is too risky. The computer wants knight to d5, which for some reason I didn't consider. I think I was scared of these ideas, but they don't work. And if bishop e7, then you just take the bishop. And I kind of thought about this sort of idea later on. I went queen e2, which is I'm almost equal. No way. d6 is a mistake, though. Knight c6 is better, preparing this. Yeah, okay. Is queen d2 better? Slightly. Huh. Well, my opponent reacted to my attack with d6. I go g4, which is, of course, the only good move to defend the pawn. Knight c6. Knight e4 is the best move, okay. Knight d4, queen d2. And after knight takes e4, I, of course, have to take because my queen is hanging. And here, I thought, wait, knight c2? If I take, then take. And it's equal. But I don't have to do that. After knight c2, king d1. And I'm winning. Because the knight's under attack, the bishop is still defended, and the bishop is still attacking the queen. Queen's got to move. I just take the knight. Game over. But okay. My opponent goes queen e8. We play c3. Knight c6, bishop c4 check. c3 and bishop c4 check were interchangeable, really. King h8. Bishop e3 is not the best move, but I liked it. Getting rid of black's best piece. a6. Bishop e2 is the best move. That's very counterintuitive. I queenside castled. h4 is also a move. I think a move that I would be more likely to find, and I should have probably played, is just knight f3. Nice and simple. If knight a5, then just drop the bishop. And if the queen infiltrates, it's not threatening anything, because I'm not castled queenside yet. This is what I should have gone for. Castling queenside, it's fine, but it's a bit dicey. I played bishop d3, queen a4, bishop b1. My initial plan was king b1, but I realized it hung the rook. So bishop b1, b5, knight f3. How is that an inaccuracy? The immediate b4, which is what I was expecting. I can play this and run, but I probably wouldn't have played that. If b4, after knight to f3, what was my plan? I think it was knight d2. I think that was my idea. And if takes, queen takes, I was like, well, I'm fine. I've got no problems. And knight b3 maybe offers a knight trade. I should be good here. The computer wants knight to c6 in this position, which I don't think anyone's playing that, to be honest. That's a really weird move. Bishop d7 is also a weird move. Rook b8 makes more sense. That's probably more findable. And if cb4, queen b4, queen c3, queen c3, pawn c3, bishop d7, I suppose these pawns are split now. My position is a bit passive, but these pawns are a problem. But okay, knight c4. And here I just go queen d3, which is the best move. And black's attack is extinguished because this can't be played. So his best move is actually to retreat the knight. And then, again, b4 isn't really a problem. I can just start throwing pieces at my opponent, even. a3 is apparently a move. I could play the queen c2 move, but I assume the queen just retreats. Computer wants to do this. And if I trade ba4, what a counterintuitive move. And if a3, bishop a6, rook he1 stopping bishop to e2. Not gonna lie, I'd take this position with white. My bishop's probably going to come to the a2 square if I can. And this is going to be a very strong bishop. If knight c4, I'll just take it. Okay. a5. This allows a queen trade, which isn't the best move, but from a human perspective, I believe it is. Takes, b4. Bishop b3, best move. Knight b6. cb4, ab4. King b1's an inaccuracy. King d2 is better. Ah, that's interesting. Maybe the king wants to go to, like, e3? If I move, like, bishop a6? Yeah, king e3. And the king defends this. And the knight can't check me. If the knight comes to c4, just take. Rook c1. Okay, this feels a little bit dangerous, but I suppose it's fine. And if the bishop comes, like, to b3, rook d7, rook a2, take. This does feel kind of scary, but I suppose the computer just doesn't think so. Maybe just rook c1? I don't know, that's risky. It feels risky, but... Okay, king b1, I'm still fine. Knight d7, we find knight g5, which is the best move. Knight c5, knight f7 check immediately is better? Why? Oh! The threat was stronger than the execution. If king g8, then we go for this line that I mentioned before. And if something like takes, we're just up 2 clean pawns, right? And if after knight d6, my opponent takes... Sorry, he can't take. If he moves the king back, then we could take the bishop or go knight back to f7. If... What else was I thinking? If instead, yeah, if rook f7, bishop f7, there's now no longer knight to e4 because now bishop d5. This is what I missed. And now I'm just attacking the rook. And if you take on f2, then this is completely winning. Right? The threat was stronger than the execution. I eat my words. I'm sure somebody spotted that. And somebody probably commented it before I was able to see it in the analysis. Yeah, this is wrong. Knight f7, rook f7, bishop f7, knight e4. I'm still winning. Rook hf1 is inaccurate. Better is the move f4. What on earth? Wow. If ef4, rook he1 with mate threats. Knight f6, g5, and the game is over. Wow. Rook hf1 allows bishop a6, and I completely missed this. Rook g1. Why is this so much better? Rook d2, I have to give up the g pawn. Go h3, knight f6. Dude. And then obviously this is mate. And then if like, I don't know, h6 for example. That's very difficult to find. I go rook g1, knight f2, rook c1. And the game is equal. The game is equal. e4 is a miss though. And I thought this wasn't the right idea because I was like, well, the pawn can get all the way through, but you can never get to e1. g5 is the best move. c5. Bishop b3 is a mistake. Bishop d5 was better. I was concerned about knight to h3. Because if rook g3, knight f4, I was like, well, these are very annoying threats. The computer, however, finds the only move that wins. Try and find it. It's a very nice move. Rook e1. Because if you take, then I take. And you can't take because of mate. Yeah, that's difficult to see. I've rejected bishop d5 on the basis of here, here, here. And if I don't see the move rook e1, then this is actually quite difficult. The only other good move is this. And after takes, I assume rook g4 and I win the piece back. Again, that's difficult to see. Something like this. Oh, wait, no, that blunders mate. g6. Yeah, I suppose this is winning. The e-pawn gets liquidated, but difficult to see with low time. I go bishop b3. e3 is a miss. Rook a8 is better. Rook a8 is a weird move. Nobody ever plays that. f6, best move. Bishop g6. Rook g3, a mistake? I have to go... I can't move this rook, apparently. Is it because of knight g4? I have to move this rook to e1. And if knight d3, I just take. And if knight h3, then rook g3. The problem with what I did is not gf6, but knight d3, which is what I was expecting. Here, there is f7. Well, I initially thought I could take and then play f7 with mate threats, but the problem is if takes, then knight c1, and this is actually checkmate. So I would have to find f7 immediately, because if takes, then I promote. If f7, bishop f7, bishop f7, if rook takes, then rook e3 with a threat of mate and a threat on the knight. This is so complicated. gf6, gf6. Knight e4. I take on e3, and now I'm like, okay, I should be good. There is knight f6, but now we just apply pressure. h4 is the best move, but like, come on now. The computer wants to go d5, and after bishop d5, knight d5, rook d5, it wants to try and hold this position after c4. Not very intuitive. Not very intuitive. My opponent plays the more natural rook d7. The problem is that this allows rook e6. I was expecting to move knight e4, and I had some intentions to maybe go bishop c2, although I thought this might be risky. If knight g5, bishop g6, knight e6, does bishop f5. And if rook e7, rook e1, I win the piece. Again, maybe difficult to find. My opponent goes knight e8, and this is just too passive. Bishop a4, rook d8, take, rook e d6. If the rook moves, rook d8, this is actually even worse, because the bishop is hanging, and if take, the bishop can't move because it's pinned, and the king isn't in time to save the bishop. So my opponent trades, bishop f7, and here it's just a, relatively easy clean-up job. I force my a-pawn through. My opponent can't make any progress, and then we just win the piece, cut the king off on the 5th rank, go and win all the pawns. Well, we would have gone and won all the pawns with my king, but my opponent resigns. Very interesting game. My opponent really does test my Vienna here in an opening that I have never ever seen before. Great game. And we are slowly approaching 1600. If you want to see another equally cool Vienna game, then check out the video appearing up here. And if you want to see the previous episodes of the speedrun playlist, check the playlist down there. Thank you very much for watching.